Have you ever felt a deep, unshakable guilt? One that wasn't tied to anything you did, but simply to who you are? What if guilt isn't a moral compass, but a psychological prison, a mechanism designed not to guide you, but to control you? What if, as Friedrich Nietzsche suggested, guilt was invented, not discovered? In our world, we're taught that guilt is natural, that it's part of having a conscience. But Nietzsche dares to ask, what if that conscience was artificially created? Welcome to the Unfolding Journey, the place where we dive deep into philosophy, psychology, and the timeless questions that shape who we are. If you're someone who craves insight beyond the surface, who wants to understand not just what we feel, but why, you're in the right place. Today, we explore Nietzsche's shocking claim that guilt is not a universal truth, but a historical invention. Let's unfold this journey together. The birth of guilt. To understand Nietzsche's view on guilt, we have to start where he did, with genealogy. But not the kind that traces your ancestry. Nietzsche was tracing the ancestry of morality itself. In his book on the genealogy of morals, Nietzsche describes guilt as something cultural, not biological. He believed it emerged alongside organized society, and more specifically, with the rise of religion and institutional power. Originally, the concept of guilt had nothing to do with sin or inner torment. In early societies, it was a commercial term. Should in German means both guilt and debt. If someone wronged another, they owed them compensation. That's it. No shame, no conscience, just balance. But over time, especially under the weight of Judeo-Christian morality, guilt transformed. It shifted from external restitution to internal condemnation. And this transformation, Nietzsche argued, was not progress, it was psychological colonization. Guilt and the rise of slave morality. Nietzsche famously divided morality into two categories: master morality and slave morality. Master morality was grounded in strength, pride, vitality. Slave morality was reactive, built by the weak, the oppressed, those who couldn't act directly and instead created a moral system to subdue their masters. According to Nietzsche, guilt is one of the key tools of slave morality. Why? Because it internalizes punishment. Instead of seeking external revenge, the oppressed, unable to act outwardly, developed a psychological weapon. They taught people to punish themselves. The man of raisonnement does not retaliate, instead he poisons. Nietzsche, on the genealogy of morals. So guilt becomes a form of poison. It eats at the strong. It tames the powerful. It creates a world where pride becomes sin, ambition becomes vanity, and instinct becomes evil. In short, guilt was the victory of the weak over the strong, but Nietzsche doesn't celebrate that victory. He mourns it, guilt as the internalized I. One of Nietzsche's most powerful metaphors is that of the internalized I, the gaze of the external authority that moves inward. In primitive societies, punishment came from the outside. Someone wrongs the group, and the group punishes them. But with the advent of religious morality, especially Christianity, that punishment gets turned inward. No longer does someone need to be caught or judged by others. They judge themselves, constantly, endlessly. Nietzsche believed that this internalization created what we now call conscience. But he saw this conscience not as enlightenment, but as self-cruelty. We become both the jailer and the jailed. And worst of all, we come to love our chains, mistaking guilt for virtue, penance for purity. Christianity and the cultivation of guilt. Nietzsche was particularly scathing in his critique of Christianity's role in manufacturing guilt. In his view, Christianity took natural human instincts, sexual desire, pride, ambition, and demonized them. These instincts were labeled sinful, and their presence in you became a reason for shame. But there's a twist. The church then offers salvation from the very guilt it created. You are told you're sinful, but also told that through confession, obedience, and faith, you can be forgiven. It's a self-reinforcing cycle. The sinner who suffers must accept that he deserves it. This is how religion weaponizes guilt. Nietzsche paraphrased. Nietzsche calls this the morality of resentment, a system designed not to uplift the individual, but to subjugate them. Guilt is not a mistake. It is the mechanism. Guilt and modern mental health. Now let's fast forward. Today, most of us no longer live under medieval Christianity, yet guilt remains. In our language, our behavior, our institutions. Nietzsche would argue that guilt has been secularized, but not eliminated. We feel guilty not just for sin, but for success, for desire, for simply existing. Think about modern mental health struggles, especially anxiety, depression, and perfectionism. Often at the root lies unconscious guilt. Guilt for not being productive enough. Guilt for taking up space. Guilt for failing to meet expectations. Nietzsche helps us see that these are not personal failings. They're the echoes of centuries of moral conditioning. The guilt may no longer come from a church, but from your inner critic, one shaped by culture, history, and power structures. Overcoming guilt, the path to the Übermensch. Nietzsche doesn't just diagnose the problem, he offers a challenge. His answer to guilt is not indulgence nor denial. It's transcendence. The ideal response to guilt isn't more guilt, but transformation. Nietzsche calls us to become the Übermensch, the overman, someone who creates values rather than inherits them. To do this, we must recognize guilt not as truth, but as history. Reclaim our instincts, desires, and agency. Accept ourselves as we are, not as flawed sinners, but as creative forces in a chaotic universe. It's not easy. Nietzsche knew that. But it's necessary if we want to live authentically. True freedom, for Nietzsche, is not the absence of guilt, but the awareness that guilt was never ours to begin with. What do we do with this? So where does this leave us? It's easy to misinterpret Nietzsche as cold, harsh, or nihilistic. But the opposite is true. His critique of guilt is an act of liberation, a philosophical therapy. Nietzsche wants us to see that we are not inherently broken. That much of what we feel, shame, guilt, inadequacy, is not our inner self speaking, but the residue of centuries of moral manipulation. When you feel guilt, ask, where does this feeling come from? Who benefits from me feeling this way? Is this guilt helping me grow or keeping me small? Nietzsche believed that asking these questions was the first step toward becoming who you truly are. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Nietzsche and the psychology of guilt. If this video sparked something in you, if it made you question or reflect, that's the point. Philosophy isn't about having all the answers. It's about learning to ask better questions. Cyclone here at The Unfolding Journey, we believe that understanding the past, of thought, of belief, of psychology, is the key to creating a more conscious future. Bell, if you found value in this video, please subscribe to the channel, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep questioning together. Until next time, keep unfolding.